you know, there's people in there, but a lot of young guys, you know, like myself. And I started thinking, the reason I'm in there is because there was really nothing for teenagers to do, like a Hollywood movie, Footloose. You know, they had nothing for teenagers to do. And so I talked to the magistrate. You know, that's the way I am. I went and knocked on his door in his office, and I told him, you know, the reason we get in trouble is that there's nothing for us to do. And the magistrate said, well, do something. And what? He said, yeah. If you know the problem, we'll fix it. And I had another friend whose dad was a boys, one of the operators of the Boys Club of America. And so we started the Shades Teen Club in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And because we had the Boys Club behind us, we got possession of the biggest dance hall in Calgary, Alberta, right on the main drag, every Saturday. It was like a donated to us. And I had the first black R&B band in Calgary. And so we packed that sucker, man, and made a ton of money. But the only problem was they made us quit at 11:30 because of the liquor law license, the Sunday church law. And so at about 12 midnight, we'd make it to 12 midnight, there would be all these rock and roll enthusiasts, thugs, on the street in Calgary with nowhere to go. And so they'd find out somebody would be babysitting or something, and party over here. And we started making big headlines of home invasions and all this horrible, fights. And fights would break out because of underage drinking, all the bad stuff. And so I got called into the mayor's office, the mayor of Calgary, Alberta. And the chief of police was there, and the city attorney. And they said, because they knew I had a legitimate teen club, And so they told me, you guys are going to get out of town during the Christmas holidays. And we said, all right. And so, yeah. And so we went to Vancouver, and that's really where I started my musical career, was in Vancouver. And it's been serendipity. Because I get asked a lot. This is supposed to be a Q&A, but we'll both forget the bullshit because it's hard to hear the questions and that. I'll just tell you, my biggest question is, how the hell did you do what you did? Like I said, I'm a high school dropout. When I was in prison, to finish the prison story, when I went to prison, I felt like I was going to college. I was getting some really good education, which I did. And by the way, when I was in prison, I tried to get my grade 12 because it was mandatory for prisoners that were young. With me, it wasn't mandatory, but a chance was there. And so I enrolled. In the 9 months I was there, I went to school. I tried to get my GED, and I failed. And the reason I failed is that I couldn't get past algebra. And so the teacher said, there in jail, says, just write down anything and we'll pass you. And can you imagine how valuable GED made in prison that you cheated? It was a good joke. And being a comedian, I just put it in my joke bag, thanks, but no thanks. Because in prison, I learned, it was a college for me, by the way. And there's a documentary out called AKA Tommy Chong, and it talks about my time in prison. And and it was really beneficial. I met a lot of really incredible people. I helped one guy write a bestseller and a movie. His name was Jordan Belford. He was the Wolf of Wall Street. And we were in prison together. We shared this. They put the celebrities together, by the way. And so
there's even a VIP in prison.
Oh, big time, big time. In fact, they changed the rules because I started getting so many visitors. You know, people in there, they heard that I was in there, so they would come to visit, you know, people that they had not visited for a long time. They would come and to have pictures with me. And so the warden made a law saying that I couldn't take pictures with the visitors anymore, which I kind of broke the law because you can't turn down people, you know, they've been traveling forever. And there's one guy showed up with his son in a wheelchair, and how can I turn that guy down, you know? And so I did the pictures, but I learned how to deal in prison. You tell on yourself right away, no matter what you've done, because if you tell on yourself, that means they don't have to go through, they don't have to work, in other words. And so they like that, and they say, don't worry about it, get out of here. And so I told on myself that I took pictures, and they, get out of here, it's okay, no problem. But I was such a celebrity there because I'd been on a Dr. Dre album, you know, rap album. And so I had all the black inmates coming around looking, hey, that's him. That's Chong. And so I had a fan base. The prison hierarchy were fans. In fact, we shot a video in prison in the warden's office. And while we were shooting, we were setting up the camera, and I know the movie protocol is real simple, you know. You're shooting a movie, you yell quiet on the set, everybody has to get quiet. And if they don't get quiet, then you yell at them, you know. And so I heard the warden walking around in the other room, and so I yelled, quiet on the set. And it got real quiet. And then warden comes, sorry. I'm laughing. I had so much fun. And because I was such a celebrity, I got a job. Well, I met the other celebrity. There was a golf caddy that he was in there for a long time because, given all the pro golfers, he was their man, their guy, you know, their dealer. And so he's very intelligent, very, very straight, very nice. And so he fought the case and won. But the government, shows you the government, they turned around and refiled another charge. And he never had the money to do the defense. And so he got 14 years for being just the dealer, just the guy. And so he was in there, and because he was such a genius, he got a couple of university degrees while he was in prison. And so he ran a garden for the, what do you call it? For the charity, you know, for people, the homeless and that. The prisoners couldn't eat out of this garden, but we could because we were the gardeners of it. And so we had a private home-cooked meal every day, every night, with the best produce you could possibly have, because Eric was a genius grower, and then we'd get supplement with other connections that he had. So we had gourmet meals almost every night. So prison wasn't as bad as the movies want to make it to be, you know. In fact, it was incredible for me. And then there was a skydiving team out in the desert that heard I was there. So every Sunday we'd get a show of the skydivers over the prison, and it was incredible. Yeah. And so, you know, so prison life wasn't bad. And then I joined the Native Sweat Lodge. If you just wanted to join a sweat lodge, because a sweat lodge in America is the official church of the indigenous people, the First Nations. And there's a law in America that mandates that every federal prison has to have an area for a sweat lodge. And so we had our own sweat lodge. We had our own Indian grounds, basically. Because as we made the sweat lodge, we kind of enlarged on it because, hey, we're within the law. And the guards, if you're busy in prison with something to do, In fact, that's my advice. If you're going to go to prison, act as crazy as you can. Not to hurt anybody, but just really get weird. People respect weird. So you get left alone. There was a guy in there, he did a map of America with stones and certain things, bush, desert stuff, And so when we were there, we had the gardens, and then the head of the garden guy, the Japanese, Mr. Ono, he heard that I like making bombs, and so he found some clay for me, and so I made all these clay bombs. And then the only thing I needed was a kiln to fire them up to make them work. And so we heard there was a kiln in storage that the prison once had, and then put it in storage. And so I went to the warden, and I met the warden, and that's when the first time I met, because there's two prisons. We were in a camp, and the main prison was like for all the immigrants, in fact, the language in the main prison was Spanish. And so he was the warden of the really tough prison. And I went to meet him, and he was working on his car. He wipes off his hand and shakes my hand. "Oh, Mr. Chong, how are you doing?" And I was thinking, oh, I'm in. I'm going to get the bomb, the kiln. And so I asked him about the kiln, and he gave me the yayas. And you know what the yayas are? No matter what you ask for, yeah, oh yeah. Forget it. When you get the yayas, you're not getting nothing. So my buddy and I built a kiln in the Indian grounds. And then the only thing we had to do was find a way to fire it, to get it hot enough. And so we found some railroad ties, because we really had the run of the camp. We could go anywhere we wanted all day. And the only thing you had to do was be in front of your bunk at 2 o'clock for the 2 o'clock count. Now the reason that was seared in my head is because they never told me the first day. And so I'm in the garden at 2 o'clock, the only guy on the yard. Everybody else is inside, and I see a guard walking across the field, and he's Chong. And then they barred me from the garden, but we got around it, We ran the prison anyway. But what I learned, what prisons are, they're called penitentiaries, and it's after the word penance. And penance is when you do something wrong, you need to be somewhere alone for a long time to think of what you did, and that's the idea of a penitentiary. And so I really took it to heart, and I turned my prison experience into a spiritual experience. In fact, I would attend all the different, if the Catholics were having a thing, I would be invited. If the Jews were having their celebration and so on. And with me, it was the Native Americans. And ours is the magic weed, that's our sacrament. And so, as long as you pursued that, you're cool. But not only pursuing it, but when you, the word was that there's a lot of God-seeking, fearing people in prison. The only problem is when they leave prison, they leave the Bible. They lean the Bible against the wall and walk away and create the same problems that they had before when they went in. But not all of us. And what I did, I started getting closer and closer to God. And to right now, I'm so close, man. Ooh. Well, look at me. People say, well, my belief in God is so strong. Why? And I tell them, I said, have you seen my wife? she is so gorgeous. And we've been together for over 50 some odd years. The reason we're together was that she started out being my girlfriend. I was already married. And the reason she went with me is that I was married. I was safe. She could have fun with me, but then go find her rich guy. she told her, because her mother taught her, you can fall in love with a rich guy as well as you can a poor guy. It's just as easy. So, just a minute, getting cotton mouth here. But getting back to God, it's so simple. This is what I learned when I was there. Because you get all these different religions, they have all these different ceremonies. The sweat lodge. Sweat lodge had a big ceremony. The sweat lodge, that's a ceremony. What do? You go into this little sweat area, and there's a rock that has been roasting in a fire for 7 hours, and it's in the center, and then people throw water on it to make it even hotter. It gets so fucking hot that you're sitting there, and all of a sudden I could understand what they were chanting. I understood what they were saying. They're saying, it's fucking hot in here. My walls are melting off. Fucking die. And then they stop, and then they open the flaps, and they go, anybody want to leave, you leave. Now this is a round, they do rounds. And that was the first round, and I tried to get up, but I had a cramp, man. And they closed the flap. 5 flaps later, man, everybody's gone. There's only me and the chief. And he looks at me and he said, Chong, you're a true warrior, my son. No one has ever survived 5 flaps. You did it. Then that's when he realized I was dead. So they brought me outside and they revived me, and it was good. Oh, good. Hey, back in there, throwing the water. No, it was incredible. And we woke up the cops had to leave, the prison guards and the warden that sweat lodge always pissed them off, because it was off guard. They couldn't do it. The guards do more hard time than prisoners do. They got their uniforms on. We're laying in the sun, and then we're like pretending the guards are attendants. Excuse me, could you give me a Coke? They didn't hear it, but we would think it. And the guards would have to be with their uniforms and sweating and everything else. And so there's a time when, the weekends, hardly any guards there. And so that was when we were going to fire up the kiln. And we fired up the kiln, and the fire we had railroad ties burning, and we're in a prison. And the fire department, everybody ignored us, totally. But I never got the kiln hot enough for the bombs. And so they were not quite done. But I got the idea, the freedom. Because they're putting me in jail for something that is older than the pyramids even. Hemp goes back to the beginning of time. Hemp was when Moses was doing the 10 Commandments. It was, remember he talked to the burning bush? Come on. Can you think of any other burning bush that would give you messages? And that burning bush, I see the burning bush go, hey, Mo, come here, boy. this bud's for Jews. And Moses turned on, man. As soon as he got turned on, he parted the Red Sea, man. It was all sorts of good things. Oh, by the way, I got an AI app. Lady, she's real sweet. And I asked her, I said, are any of the events, which events in the Bible are factually true? And she said, none of them. Not one. They can't name one fact where they get facts. In fact, they mix up facts. That's what, well, the Bible is written by men, it was written by people. And they're writers. And as a writer, I'm a writer, we exaggerate at times. Or we omit a lot of things at times. But the thing is about God, it's so simple. And that's what I found out in prison. I found God. Because God's always been here, because we are of God. And the reason I with the AI, I asked her another thing. I said, in some religions, I think it's the Catholics, where they say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Now, I know the Father, and I know what they mean by the Son, but the Holy Ghost. And so I asked AI, I said, what is the Holy Ghost? And she said, it's God's representation for you. Each of us have a Holy Ghost. And that's our connection to God. That's who answers our prayers. That's who finds a parking spot for us. That's the one that tells, all of a sudden your keys turn up because you said, where the hell are my keys? Oh, there they are. That's the Holy Ghost. And we all have the Holy Ghost. And the rules are very simple. The rules are in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father. Those two words. Our means everybody. Father. And everybody knows that a father. A father is the guy that has the sperm that creates the offspring. They didn't say mother. It's our Father, because fathers, after they've done their job, they can fuck off. And that's God. God did his job. He created us, and that's it. And then he created a world where we have to learn. It's called the physical world. And like I said, everything is simple. Energy is simple. You know what energy is, what light is? And they say in the Bible, you give us light. You know what light is? Positive against negative. Meaning, creating an energy that creates electrical, which creates light, which also creates a car. The Tesla. It's so simple. And that's what our life is. That's what the physical world is. And everything has an opposite, except God. That's why all religions say there is only God, because that's where it starts. And if you wonder what God is number one. That's what they say in the Bible, God. There's only God, and God is number one. Now, mathematically, you can only have one. Because if you have two ones, then you have two, or three, or four, or five. But in the beginning, which was always, the beginning was always an end too, but it's always one. And so that's God in the physical world. Now, what's the opposite? We talk about opposite. What's the opposite of the physical world? In the physical world, we have everything. So the opposite of everything is nothing. That's the spiritual world. That's what we are. Basically, we're nothing except a thought of God. God created us first in his mind. And when God whatever God creates is created forever. And that's what we are. So we are eternal beings of God. And we communicate with God through the Holy Ghost. And the reason we're not all perfect is we're not here to be perfect. Because if we were perfect, we would be with God. But we're not. We're here in school with all the sinners and the gangsters and the bad guys and the scary guys and the good guys and all kinds of everybody in between. And what are we doing? We're here experiencing and learning and evolving. We're growing. We're growing. And if you don't like who you are, relax. In a few years, you won't be who you are. Because we change. We change as we live. We change every 7 years. And there's another thing of God is music, sound. In the beginning was the sound. It was the Word, and the Word was God. That sound, the ability to hear sound, and what a sound is divided up into tones, and we've named the tones. There's a tone named C, D, E, F, and there's like 7 before you have an octave. And so there's so many magical things around numbers, because when you start with God as number 1, and every other number is equal to number 1, in a sense. I mean, the simplicity of it all eludes us, most of us. And the reason it does is because we're here to learn. And the ones that learn, the old gurus and that, they all have one thing in common. They all smile and laugh. They got a twinkle in their eye. Because they know shit that you guys and all of us are learning. And they can't teach us. They can, push us in the right direction. But we're here to learn. That explains Donald Trump. Because if you don't think God has a sense of humor, how else can you explain all of that?
Well, when I think about smiling and laughing and the twinkle in the eye, I certainly think about you, Tommy Chong. Wisdom and the twinkle in the eye.